Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea is entering a new phase of national transformation, one driven by artificial intelligence. President Lee Jae-myung's administration has declared AI a top-tier strategic priority, pledging 100 trillion Korean won, roughly $72 billion in public and private investment. From the creation of a centralized AI control tower within the presidential office to launch of the regionally distributed data centers, Korea aims to become one of the top 3 global AI powers. With OpenAI now establishing a Seoul branch, and with Korea still facing gaps in model development and industrial adoption, the question is whether the country can turn this momentum into long-term leadership. For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined here in the studio by Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Quebec government here in Seoul. Well, big welcome.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And also to my right, we're also joined by Dr. Gulnush Fornadi, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at McGill University in Manila. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start our discussion right away, starting with Dr. Fornadi. So under the President Lee Jae-myung administration, the presidential office will include a chief secretary for future AI strategy. How do you think this centralized approach could impact some, cooperation with international countries?
I think this is a great opportunity for top players in Korea to collaborate. It can be a Ministry of AI or MEIE and Korean government. But there's also a lot of collaboration happening already between Quebec and Canada and Korea, and I think that can integration can actually facilitate this kind of collaboration. Last year I've been in Korea as part of delegation of Ivado, and we actually host some of the startups at Milo, which kind of showing this kind of collaboration we're going on. And I think this kind of centralization actually helping this kind of navigation organization for this. There's also, Korea is so big and there are so many AI players, and I think that can also help for managing this better. Quebec is also doing so much of collaboration. So, for example, I have a lab that I'm collaborating with MasterCards for facing this EU Act, privacy laws and fairness laws. But also I'm working with, for example, Dubai, for creating language model for Arabic languages. So this kind of international collaboration are very common in Quebec, and I think this can actually facilitate this centralized approach in Korea.
Definitely. A clear command structure could definitely streamline cross-border alignment as well. Now, also, one of the biggest bets under that vision, Mr. Lim, is that Korea plans to launch this K-Mistral model which comes after France's Mistral AI, and it's also the part of a 100 trillion Korean won investment project, of course. How realistic do you think is this model, and do you expect a success?
It's a great question. Just for the audience, Mistral AI, it's a multimodal LLM, a little bit like ChatGPT, where yes, you could have text, but also video and imaging, so it's a very good system. But what's quite interesting is Mistral is France, so we just first have to think about the France ecosystem. Of course, France has the EU. Of course, they have a great Horizon research network, whatnot. So I'm not saying Korea cannot do this, but I would say Korea lacks some of these parts that France has, like the ecosystem to be able to actually create something like Mistral AI. I always mention things like Korea might lack a bit of the infrastructure. Yes, they do have some NVIDIA chips, graphic cards like the H100 series, but is still a bit lacking. Also, talent is a bit lacking as well. We'll talk about in other questions. So these kind of key factors like talent, infra, Korea does have some of this, but France, I think, has a bigger ecosystem within the EU framework. Yes, they have other countries right beside them to work with. They have many great research university networks, and Korea does have some of this, but I feel that Korea needs to expand on this, because AI isn't just like a one-day, but it's kind of a comprehensive technology.
But having this as a model would definitely, help Korea boost its development.
Yes, absolutely.
By looking at it as well. Now, but investment actually alone cannot guarantee its impact. Despite leading AI patents per capita, South Korea still lags in industrial adoption. How do you think Korea can, collaborate with other countries to help close that gap?
I think Canada is a good example for international collaboration. Canada has a CFAR program that actually brought so many international researchers to be at Canada. And it also creates so many standardization around AI. So for instance, Montreal Declaration of AI is going back to 2019, right? So kind of like how we can think about ethical approaches. Government of Canada also create a standardization. So Korea can actually learn about this kind of like standardization, how they can actually make it more practical. I think there are a number of startups in Korea is much more than we have in Quebec, but in particular, Canada is good in fundamental research. So we have many research institutes that are so big. So for example, I'm part of MILA, and MILA is one of the biggest AI research labs in Quebec, even in the world. Like we have more than 1,000 researchers, but we are focusing more on the fundamental research. And I think part of like this kind of collaboration can actually help bringing that fundamental research into practical application, but it actually requires context, right? So this kind of collaboration can actually help to bringing those kind of like cultural values, context in Korea, with kind of like Korean researchers also getting involved.
Mm-hmm. So as Dr. Fernandi has touched upon, Mr. Lim, could you also tell us about what makes this partnership between Canada and Korea, especially Quebec, so effective?
Yes, so great question. Just to piggyback off Golnuch's comments, Canada and Quebec, I think they're a bit leader in more of the fundamental research. If I had to mention, we use something called TRL levels, technology readiness level. It's from 1 to 9. 1's kind of being developed, 9's almost ready for commercialization. I would say Canada and Quebec, with great professors like Dr. Fernandi, they're very good at fundamental. But what Canada and Quebec lacks, in my point of view, is after they kind of get that prototype MVP going, to really get it commercialized, they lack some of the infrastructure or the talent or some of the big players like Samsung, LG, because it's the LG, Samsungs, and SK Hynix, for example. They have the talent, but the capital and the know-how to be able to get that technology from maybe technology readiness like 4, 5, 6 to really get it going and commercialize it and start selling it. Because in the end, a product or service, if you could actually sell it and make money, that's where real innovation happens. So, and other examples, Canada and Quebec is a leader in AI. If you know, there's a partnership called GPay, Global Partnership in AI. It was launched around 2018-2020 with the leadership of France and Canada together during the G7. So in these kind of perspective, Canada and Quebec is a leader in terms of bring the world together, let's do AI together. But Korea, they have the tech, they have the big conglomerates that know how to actually use this, give it to the citizens, the customers, have them actually use it and start innovating this way. I think this is a very big difference, but it's very comparative.
Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of give and take between the two
exactly.
countries. But speaking of, Quebec, it's well known as an AI hub. Could you tell us how this ecosystem has been built and what South Korea actually could learn from them?
Yes, so if you really think about AI, like the AI that we know today, like ChatGPT, LLMs, they haven't been around that long. But AI's, like actual fundamental AI has been around since like the 60s, 70s. If you think about AI, it's basically giving it some data, it analyzes and it gives you some sort of a result. So we had simple AI models since the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But back then, when you mentioned AI, nobody really cared, or they didn't even really know. They're like, oh, that's far away in the future. But, so we call that kind of the AI winter time, where people didn't really do much about it. But the government of Canada and Quebec as well, they realized maybe it's not the time now, but let's just continue to invest. Let's put a lot of talent, effort to attract the talent, create the ecosystem today. So maybe in 10, 20 years later, it'll actually show results. And that's actually what happened. So in the 90s, when there was AI winter, nobody really cared about AI that much. They attracted key talents such as Dr. Yoshua Bengio or Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton. So Hinton went to Toronto, Yoshua went to Montreal, and they set up their kind of labs and started Mila and the ecosystem. And then back then when people wanted to learn or do AI, yes, there's America as well, but not that many people did it. So they're like, if it's AI, let's go to Montreal and Toronto. And from 5 year, 10 year, 20 years, now we're seeing the fruits of that benefit. So
Wow, it took a really long time.
exactly.
So you have to continue digging in that part. Now, to one of the most highest moves, biggest moves recently, OpenAI is opening in Seoul. And I want to ask this question. It's a very straightforward question. Do you think South Korea is, Dr. Fernardi, do you think South Korea is ready to lead in AI? And could you also tell us why do we still fall behind in large-scale model development?
I think it's an interesting that OpenAI is coming to Korea. I think there is a big market here, of course, right? So they are kind of going to benefit from this market. But I think Korea needs to think more long-term, to develop their own language models, to not be dependent on outsiders kind of like coming to this market. And part of the lack that I'm seeing in Korea is just the infrastructure that it needs to train such models, and also the data. I think like most of the models that are currently out there are trained based on the publicly available data. Publicly available data are mostly in English. So they are working very well in English, but in other languages, there is so much of lacking. So one thing that Korea can actually do better is not only kind of like investing on infrastructure to train this model, but also creating better quality data, right? How it can actually benefit Korean culture and also have this data to kind of like representing the Korean language. And I think that can actually be better than kind of like bringing like other companies like OpenAI to open up the office here. They can actually compete with those, at least, if they can invest on this kind of infrastructure and data.
So creating better quality AI that's solely from Korea, that would be helpful. Now, these ecosystems actually also depend on talent powers, of course. It's really important. And OpenAI's entry highlights local R&D and education as well. Mr. Lim, what must Korea actually do to, attract and also maintain and keep top global AI talents?
So very good question. I think that's a question everyone's asking these days. I would say there's many things to talk about, but the one thing I really wanted to say is quality of life. I'm not saying Korea is a terrible place to live or anything, but generally if we do kind of a modeling, let's say, maybe you're an AI scientist, you have reasonable finances, you have the ability to go around the world, would you actually want to settle in Korea? For example, maybe some of the housing prices might be too much, or maybe the cost of education is too high, or maybe there's too much competition, etc. So yes, there's a tech part, education, ecosystem, that's very important too. But what I find that is people don't think about the quality of life part too much. So how to solve this is the government needs to obviously provide a better quality of life, maybe provide some subsidies for the children, for their education, maybe housing, whatnot. And in the Canadian Quebec perspective, how we attract talent is exactly that, good quality of life. So I'm not saying, of course, all major cities these days, they're higher housing prices, whatnot, but it's at least still somewhat affordable. For example, in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver is a bit more expensive, but definitely compared to Korea, it's not. Also, there's less competition, so kids, it's easier to raise them there. Unlike Korea, where of course Korea is very well educated, but it's also quite competitive. So as a child, you might have to go to lots of academies, whatnot. But in Canada and Quebec, there's less of this. So maybe they have the time and the luxury to kind of follow a passion. If their passion is AI and development, then we will probably have a Nobel laureate right there. Yes, so there's many other factors, but one of the biggest thing I think is quality of life. Of course, I could go on, I could talk about things like visa and immigration. Korea is not exactly the easiest place to come for a visa and immigration, even if you have the skills. Or there's other key things, maybe things like, maybe Korea needs to provide some safety nets in terms of maybe some acceptance of failure, because innovation, there'll always be risks of failure. And I'm not saying Korea is very bad, but because Korea is very competitive, everyone want to show the good things, they want to succeed. But of course, innovation, you also learn from the failures. But I think Korea is not as accepting of these kind of things. So I think these kind of cultures need to change. But one more thing I also wanted to add is, maybe to attract talent, Korea needs to send people more abroad and trying to bring them For example, in the Quebec government office here in Korea, they have a dedicated science person like me who does a lot of this good work so that there's a lot of collaboration going on. But I feel that the Korean embassies abroad, yes, they have political people and all that stuff, but not so much the science tech innovation people. Because if they're there, they could promote Korea's science tech innovation, tell them how great it is, oh, great salaries, we have Samsung, we have this, great jobs, this and that, great universities, then they'll know and they could try to bring them. So maybe Korea needs to a little bit up the game in terms of international collaboration by actually sending people. And just to add to that, very recently we have good results where the science capital of Korea, Daejeon, there's a mayoral delegation in Quebec. They've signed agreements. And one of the things we'll do is we'll try to send the Daejeon official to actually stay in Quebec for like a year or two. So what they will do, they'll promote Daejeon, they'll do many other international collaboration, but also promote Korea. And from that relation, maybe he or she will be able to attract talent this way.
So more exchanges and better settlement measures
Yes.
would be definitely important. Now, let's also shift gears in terms of responsibility. Of course, AI is getting bigger and bigger, and there's more responsibility that's going to be weighing in. As AI risks grow from misinformation to physical harm, why is safety very urgent, and what kind of roles should governments play to, maintain and, push through with ethics?
I think this is an interesting question. Why everyone thinks about safety of AI? Safety is not just about AI, so people actually think about safety in different technologies, right? But what is changing with respect to AI is just like different technologies, like when you're talking about kind of like airplane safety, right? Most of the times when you're thinking about safety is going to be physical harm. Right? However, in AI, it's not just physical. It can be misinformation, it can be like discrimination, it can be higher quality services to different group of people. So we have to actually have a spectrum of like harms that can be towards the society. First of all, like why people are thinking about safety of AI so seriously at this point is because we are actually developing the technology that has capabilities that we are not really know how they can actually kind of like people are going to use it, right? So people are currently using it for misinformation, you can see deep fake, etc. But like the capabilities are growing, like AI systems are getting better and better. And what we need to create to be more responsible with respect to kind of like how society is going to use it is going to create benchmarks and evaluation for these kind of capabilities. We currently lack this kind of evaluation and measurements, specifically for other languages. So even the measurements and benchmarks that we have often are created for English language. So we are lacking so much on kind of like measuring the harm towards a society, which is going to be outside of like English speaking. Even for English, we are still not there. And we also need to create more regulations and rules in order to create these kind of like safeguards around AI. And we have to also think more about like, it's not just about the technology, it's also about kind of like how the technology are going to be used and how it's going to be impact the society to create better technology for the society, right? So people are focusing so much on the race of creating bigger models. However, it's not just a bigger model, it's going to be how we are going to use these bigger models for society. And we can actually change the spectrum of like how we are using this AI system if we are thinking more responsibility about development of the AI.
Right, a very important point. This unmeasurable capabilities pose a lot of risks, and we must pay attention to that, of course. We are kind of running out of time, so we might have to jump to our last question. So finally, Dr. Fernardi, so looking beyond today's landscape, could you tell us, how do you think South Korea can evolve from fast adopter to a global model for a responsible AI innovation?
I'm working on responsible for more than 10 years now, right? And I see like still there is a lack of knowledge. Today, I gave a presentation. I asked the audience, have they heard about algorithmic discrimination? And there are a few hands only, right? However, I'm working on this field for 10 years. I think education is key. So we have to kind of bring this awareness about kind of like the risk of AI. And people should know like what they are facing. And media, like yourself, kind of like news coverage around this technology can actually help a lot. But also we have to create kind of like educational platforms at the university, even at the school. Like kids should know, like kids' safety is very important. They are not even aware of like this kind of like consequences of AI systems. And I think that's very, very important, this kind of like awareness. But also government should also spend funding for kind of like supporting research towards responsible AI. And I think this is also something that like Korea needs to improve with respect to kind of like the type of research that they are doing, and not focusing so much on creating technology, but kind of like more ethical and responsible technology.
So better education and also government support would be definitely helpful. We'll be looking forward to that. But I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for our discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Mr. Lim.
Thank you.
And also Dr. Fernardi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.